time before the prosecution gets to redirect and kind of re-enter their spin and do damage control and try to get their case back on the rails.
An effort to rehabilitate their witness. All right, WNYC's Fred Mokel on the Joseph Percoco trial. Thank you so much, Fred.
Thanks, Jamie.
Time for our documentary of the week from Tom Powers and Raphael Nehausen, co-founders of the Doc NYC Festival and Pure Nonfiction Podcast. Here's Raphael with this week's pick.
The new documentary, The Peacemaker, profiles a charming Boston bar owner who leads a double life. The second one, traveling the world starting dialogues between warring parties. His name is Padraig O'Malley, and he began his mission in 1975, trying to diffuse tensions in his homeland.
At the height of the troubles in Northern Ireland, I saw that the problem could only be resolved if all the parties in the conflict were talking to each other. So I had this colossal simple idea. Why not try to bring all the parties in one big forum and have them all talk to each other?
Filmmaker James Demo follows O'Malley around the world to conflicts in the Balkans, the Middle East, and beyond. O'Malley's former girlfriend describes his complex personality.
He is utterly, completely, and thoroughly devoted to the dark, sort of exploring the dark side of human nature. Why do people engage in violence? And for him, I think it really is a reflection of a lot of the inner conflicts and inner turmoil that he's lived with his entire life.
The film explores those inner conflicts and the sacrifices O'Malley's made. He describes his highest goal to a forum of antagonists from around the world that he organized in Belfast.
We have something magnificent going, and make sure that your children and the children of your children will not have to go through the legacy of the past.
O'Malley has mostly worked behind the scenes. Now this film gives him the spotlight he so deserves. The Peacemaker opens this weekend at Cinema Village. For more information, visit wnyc.org/docs.
Broken bottles and little man's feet. Bodies strewn across the street. Do you believe everything you see on social media? Stick with the names you trust.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Rachel Martin in Washington, D.C.
And I'm David Gray.
Nancy Solomon, WNYC News.
Scott Horsley, NPR News, Tokyo.
Andrea Bernstein, WNYC News.
Arun Venugopal, WNYC News.
Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
Julia Merritz, WNYC News.
Cindy Rodriguez, WNYC News.
Listen to Morning Edition every day on WNYC.
WNYC supporters include Your Part-Time Controller, helping nonprofit organizations with all of their accounting and financial reporting needs. Your Part-Time Controller, the nonprofit accounting specialists. More at yourparttimecontroller.com. The Jerome L. Green Foundation, committed to New York City's cutting-edge performing, digital, and visual arts communities.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. A Broadway revival opens this month, the landmark two-part theater event Angels in America. The plays, which deal with AIDS and homosexuality, have been produced and published and taught all over the world in the last quarter century. Now there's a new tool for understanding them, an oral history called The World Only Spins Forward. Critic Bob Mondello calls the book a fascinating backstage tour.
By the time Angels in America got to Broadway in 1993, after workshops, a pair of West Coast stagings, and an ecstatically received London production, it played like the smash audiences had heard it was. Playwright Tony Kushner had created what he called a gay fantasia on national themes, a play that explored the AIDS era with characters real and fictional in situations that were seriously out there.
What are you doing in my hallucination?
I am not in your hallucination. You're in my dream.
You're wearing makeup.
So are you.
But you're a man.
A winged angel flew in at the end of the first half, and that was after the action had leapt from Manhattan to Salt Lake City to Antarctica. Imagine the performers' reactions at that first read-through. Actually, you don't have to imagine, because in their book, The World Only Spins Forward, Isaac Butler and Dan Kois got them to talk about it. One actress from an early Angels workshop remembers the script being more than 200 pages, and that was just the first half. Others talked of the play's crazy mix of laughter, fury, poetry, drag queens, closeted lawyers, Mormons, and especially politics. Would an audience get it? No one knew for sure, including, the authors learned, playwright Tony Kushner.
Opening night, which is Critics' Night, they all sit there. It's like performing at a stenographer's convention. Nobody laughs, and it's horrible. And they all go home and write their reviews, and the reviews come out.
Here he's talking about the first London production before there was any talk about bringing Angels to New York. Kushner and director Declan Donnellan had disagreed strenuously about the staging. Emotions were high.
The whole cast and Declan and I were going to meet at a bar. And Declan said to the cast, I don't want anyone to read the reviews.
But actors being actors, one went to a newsstand on the way to the bar.
And then he comes in with this armload of newspapers. And I said, Jeffrey, what plays? It's all the reviews, darling.
And once they'd been plunked on a table, Donnellan forgot all about his instructions and started reading them aloud, sight unseen.
And Tony was sort of shriveling on the other side of the table. And I read all these reviews, and they all total raves. And then I realized in a way what an awful and risky thing I'd done. It just never occurred to me that anybody could say a word against it.
The book weaves together this sort of in-the-moment remembrance with the reactions of everyone from critics to gay Congressman Barney Frank. More than 200 interviews in all, not just to show how this play found its voice, but also to place it in context. Angels was in, and was dramatizing, a moment when the purple splotch of Kaposi's sarcoma, evidence of a compromised immune system, amounted to a death sentence.
It's just a burst blood vessel. Not according to the best medical authorities. What? KS, baby. Lesion number 1. The wine-dark kiss of the angel of death. I'm a legionnaire. The foreign legion. The American legion. Legionnaire's disease. My troubles are legion. Stop! Don't you think I'm handling this well? I'm going to die.
The actor sobbing through that passage is Joe Mantello, now celebrated as the director of the smash hit musical Wicked, but completely unknown before Angels opened on Broadway in 1993.
I was virtually unhirable.
He tells the authors he was unskilled at auditioning.
It wasn't like a natural progression of somebody who'd been working a lot off Broadway. It was really like very few acting jobs. Angels in America.
Today, the play attracts much bigger names. Movie star Andrew Garfield, who not long ago was Hollywood's Spider-Man, will wear the wine-dark kiss of the Angel of Death in this month's Broadway revival. The book's authors spoke with him, too, about how his own sexuality affects playing a now iconic gay character.
I, as far as I know, am a heterosexual male in a heterosexual male's body, and I'm not confused about that. And of course, the responsibility of taking on this role in a seminal play, a seminal gay play, filled me with joy, because I knew deep down that it was going to be fine. But just above that deep down was a layer of terror, of I'm the wrong person for this.
He does have big shoes to fill, as have the dozens of other actors who have played this part. Even after a quarter century, memories of Stephen Spinella standing up to AIDS and an unreliable partner, and the arrival of that problematic angel, remain strong.
And lo, the prophet was led by his nightly dreams to the hiding place of the sacred implement.
You cracked the refrigerator. You probably released a whole cloud of fluorocarbons. That's bad for the environment.
My wrath is as fearsome as my countenance is splendid.
Performers told the book's authors about one time the angel's countenance was less splendid. Her wig caught in the rigging as she was flying in, and the director came home to a phone message from a patron who raved about the moment, quote, when the angel turned upside down screaming and her wings fell into the audience and the stage manager came out. It looked so real, he said, but I knew you'd rehearsed it. Theater magic. You gotta love it. And Dan Kois and Isaac Butler have captured a lot of it in their Angels in America oral history, The World Only Spins Forward. I'm Bob Mondello.
And you're listening to All Things Considered on WNYC. Stay tuned for another hour of the program, and then later on the media will kick off at WNYC's Friday evening lineup at 8 by looking at the past, present, and future of our complicated relationship
with alcohol, from its days as a source of nourishment to its depiction in modern Hollywood. Then, on a special presentation of America Abroad, experts weigh in on when it's worth a potential security risk to leak documents and reveal secrets. It's our Friday evening lineup. It starts with On the Media at 8 on 93.9 FM WNYC. Tonight, cloudy skies will have a low around 22 degrees. Currently, it's 34 degrees with partly cloudy skies over Central Park at 5 o'clock.
Support for NPR comes from WNYC members and from Trader Joe's, where they have a double dozen tulips for the love of one's life, gummy X's and O's for a new flame, or Zug sauce for those not quite ready to commit at TraderJoe's.com and at Trader Joe's on Instagram. Zoom. Zoom offers cloud video conferencing, online meetings, and a video conference room solution in one platform, featuring digital video and audio with screen sharing, account registration, and more at zoom.us. And the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting stories of women in science, such as Margot Lee Shetterly's Hidden Figures, and the new documentary, Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story. More at sloan.org.
This is WNYC FM, HD, and AM, New York.
Today, President Trump signed the congressional deal ending a brief government shutdown that began at midnight and funding the government through March. I'm Jamie Floyd. This is All Things Considered on WNYC. Republicans often portray House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi as a liberal boogeyman.
Now let me paint a picture for you. A year from now, the next State of the Union, Nancy Pelosi's not seated on the floor. She's up there on the podium behind the President of the United States.
Pelosi doesn't appear bothered by the attacks from them or from those in her own party. Complete coverage of that coming up. Plus, a California legislator and leader of the Me Too movement is herself now accused of harassment. And in the 21st century, do you ever wonder why printers still jam? We'll explore the persistent limits of technology.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. President Donald Trump has signed a major budget agreement ending a brief government shutdown. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the temporary plan to fund the government through March 23rd increases spending for both the military and domestic programs.
The legislation cleared Congress after opposition from both parties. Some Republicans objected to the boost in spending, arguing it would recklessly increase budget deficits. Democrats criticized the plan, saying it lacked a provision to protect hundreds of thousands of young immigrants from deportation. The bill sets up a 2-year plan that would raise the spending cap by $300 billion. It also authorizes aid for U.S. states and territories still recovering from last year's natural disasters and extends the popular children's health care program for another 4 years. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump says he hopes a top aide who was forced to resign this week amid allegations of spousal abuse has, quote, a great career ahead of him. Trump's comments in reference to former White House Staff Secretary Rob Porter, who the president said did a good job while he was in the White House. Porter's been accused by domestic abuse by 2 ex-wives as well as a former girlfriend, charges he's denied. Trump also told reporters today he was very sad about that news. In a high-stakes battle over self-driving cars, Uber has reached a settlement with Alphabet's Waymo. NPR's Aarti Shahani reports.
Waymo, which is owned by Google parent company Alphabet, sued Uber for theft of trade secrets. The parties battled it out this week in federal district court in San Francisco. Uber's fallen former chief, Travis Kalanick, had to testify, and now Uber's new chief has agreed to give Waymo shares of his company, valued at nearly $250 million, and Uber has agreed to not use Waymo's confidential information to build its own self-driving fleet. The statement from Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi reads like a love letter to Alphabet. We are partners. We share a deep belief. We won't agree on everything. While I cannot erase the past, I can commit. Khosrowshahi also says he doesn't believe any trade secrets found their way into Uber's still early efforts. Arti Shahani, NPR News, San Francisco.
Amazon is known for disrupting industries, think bookstores and retail, and now the company appears to have its sights set on another target. Perhaps not surprisingly, given its business model. The Wall Street Journal is reporting Amazon is looking at a new shipping service that will allow it to pick up packages from businesses and deliver them directly to consumers. The service is expected to roll out in Los Angeles in the next few weeks before a more broad trial. Another volatile session on Wall Street. Stocks zigged and zagged between triple-digit gains and losses before ending the session in positive territory. But even so, this goes down as one of the worst overall weeks on Wall Street. The Dow lost 5%. The Dow ended up 330 points today. The Nasdaq rose 97 points. This is NPR.
You're listening to WNYC in New York. I'm Jamie Floyd. An immigrant rights leader who was scheduled to be deported tomorrow will be allowed to stay in this country for the near future due to a last-minute court order. A federal judge ordered the delay after activist Ravi Ragbeer filed a lawsuit alleging that immigration authorities had targeted him and other immigration leaders for speaking out against deportation practices. His lawyers said Ragbeer will likely be able to remain here until at least mid-March. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has said the agency is deporting Ragbeer because he was convicted of wire fraud in connection with his job at a mortgage company. His defenders say he has already served 30 months of the sentence related to that case and has paid his debt to society. A former New Jersey congressman is reportedly joining the Security and Exchange Commission. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Republican Scott Garrett of Sussex County is joining the commission as an advisor. Andrew Ackerman is with the Journal, and he says Garrett is known for being critical both of regulations imposed on Wall Street and of the agency he's now joining.
It's fair to say there is some degree of irony that a pretty consistent critic of the government, specifically the SEC, ends up taking a staff job working at the SEC.
Last year, President Trump nominated Garrett to lead the U.S. Export-Import Bank, but senators rejected the nomination. The SEC declined to comment on the hiring. And Democratic legislators from New York and New Jersey are pushing for federal legislation that would require testing for sleep apnea among rail operators and truck drivers. The group introduced the new bills in response to a recent report from federal investigators that linked 2 train crashes in our area to engineers with sleep apnea. The MTA and NJ Transit now screen train operators for the sleep disorder, but it's not a federal requirement. The Obama administration had proposed regulations that would make screening for sleep apnea across the country mandatory, but President Trump withdrew the measure last month. Currently, 34 degrees, partly cloudy in Central Park at 5:06.
Support for NPR comes from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, celebrating 20 years of grant-making and supporting a new initiative to help retain physician scientists with caregiving obligations. Learn more at ddcf.org.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. With drums, K-pop dancers, and pyrotechnics, South Korea kicked off the Winter Olympics. Today's opening ceremony in Pyeongchang was frosty in temperature, but symbolized a warming of relations between the two Koreas. NPR's Melissa Block reports.
It was a bone-chilling 17 degrees in the heatless, roofless stadium. Spectators were given seat cushions and hand warmers, a blanket and hat, to sustain them through a spectacle that combined Korean folklore, legend, and futuristic technology. And, of course, what would any self-respecting Korean extravaganza be without Oppa Gangnam Style? This song coincided with the entry of Team USA in the parade of athletes, and some of them pony-pranced along Gangnam Style as they circled the stadium. But the athletes' show was stolen by the flag bearer from Tonga. Maybe you remember him from the opening ceremonies in Rio de Janeiro 2 summers ago. Then Pita Taufetefua became an instant sensation by parading shirtless, his torso slathered in coconut oil. Well, today, and did I mention it was 17 degrees? He did it again, wearing a grass skirt and sandals and a big wide grin. He's competing in cross-country skiing, by the way, but that's another story.
Olympic athlete from Russia.
Russian athletes marched behind the Olympic flag since they're barred from flying their own or hearing their anthem at these games. That's part of the punishment handed down after revelations of a systemic state-sponsored doping program.
Korea!
The biggest cheer came naturally for the home team, and for the first time in 11 years, North and South Korean athletes paraded together under a unified flag, showing an undivided Korean peninsula shaded in blue.
Imagine all the people living life in peace.
A delicate diplomatic dance led to North Korea's participation in these Olympics. South Korea won the Olympic bid by promising that these would be the peace games, promoting reconciliation between North and South and helping to defuse nuclear tension. In a stunning development, Kim Yo-jong, the influential younger sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, flew into South Korea for the games. This marks the first time since the Korean War that a member of the Kim dynasty has set foot across the border. So there was this remarkable sight in the presidential box at the opening ceremony, the South Korean president shaking hands with a powerful member of the North Korean regime. Meantime, sitting just a few feet away and not shaking hands was Vice President Mike Pence, who heads up the U.S. delegation. This week, Pence warned that North Korea would soon face what he called the toughest and most aggressive economic sanctions ever. And he said he wants to make sure that North Korea doesn't use the Winter Olympics to, in his words, paper over the truth about their regime. As far as we know, the two did not speak. The peace and harmony games can only do so much. Melissa Block, NPR News, Pyeongchang, South Korea.
All right, here in Washington, we are awaiting another memo. Last week, the House Intelligence Committee released a controversial Republican memo that says the FBI used faulty intelligence to secure a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. This new memo that we are awaiting is the rebuttal from Democrats on the committee. It could be made public later today, or over the weekend, or never. The dueling memos speak to the partisan feud that has spilled out of the Intelligence Committee's secure chambers and played out in public. And now come reports that bickering has gotten so bad there are plans to build a wall to physically separate Republican and Democratic staff. Jeremy Bash was chief counsel on the House Intelligence Committee before moving on to senior posts at the CIA and the Pentagon, and he joins us now. Welcome.
Hey, Mary Louise.
Hey there. So, having spent many hours in those secure committee rooms I just mentioned, what's your reaction to the prospect of a wall to separate Democratic and Republican staffers?
Well, it's a horrible, disappointing development, Mary Louise. I mean, the committee has been largely nonpartisan, and it's probably the least partisan congressional committee, and that's because it oversees fundamentally nonpartisan activities of the U.S. intelligence community. But when Chairman Nunes believes that Donald Trump and the president of his party is being somewhat challenged, perhaps by the intelligence community and by intelligence oversight, he's taken the committee down a very partisan path, and this wall that he's building is just the latest physical manifestation.
I should be transparent about your ties. You're talking about Chairman Devin Nunes, who is the Republican chair of the committee. You worked with Democrats during your government career. But let me push you on this idea that the Intel committees were ever that nonpartisan. I mean, I know as a reporter covering them, I was always told we check our politics with our cell phones when we go into these rooms and do our committee work. Was that ever really the way it worked?
There were partisan flashpoints, and I can remember during the 2000s there were debates over enhanced interrogation and NSA surveillance. But the run-of-the-mill work of the committee overseeing massive intelligence agencies like the Defense Intelligence Agency or the National Reconnaissance Office, which puts spy satellites in the air, billions of dollars spent. These are nonpartisan, non-political issues, and it really falls to a fairly nonpartisan staff to oversee these operations in secret.
What is lost, Jeremy Bash, when lawmakers who are charged with overseeing U.S. intelligence can't find a way to work together in a bipartisan way?
Well, this committee was one of the major post-Watergate reforms, and it strengthened congressional oversight and ultimately accountability for the intelligence community. And I think these committees play a big role in making sure that taxpayer dollars are spent well and that the operations are appropriate and lawful. And if that oversight function is broken, then I think we get less out of our intelligence community, and less to defend the country with.
So that is the way they were set up. Let me bring you up to the present, and this committee is one of several which is supposed to be pulling off a credible, serious Russia investigation. Do you harbor hope that it will be able to do that?
Well, I harbor a little hope that it can continue to look at Russia's meddling. I don't harbor a lot of hope that it will look at the issue of whether or not people in the Trump organization worked with the Russians, discussed with the Russians, or had knowledge of what the Russians were doing. That's, I think, a bridge too far for Republicans, and they've been unwilling to go down that path.
But you think that they will be able to examine the question of what Russia may have done in the 2016 election and how to stop it from doing the same thing this year?
I would hope so, although, again, to date, we haven't seen a lot either from Republican leadership on the Hill or from the administration about exactly how we're going to prepare for the next wave of Russian attacks that we know is coming.
Jeremy Bash, thanks very much.
Thanks, Mary Louise.
Jeremy Bash, veteran of the House Intelligence Committee staff, now managing director at Beacon Global Strategies.
Democrats provided the votes this morning to pass a major 2-year budget deal that capped a high-stakes week for House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. She set a record by giving an 8-hour speech on the House floor, protesting that the bill did not include an immigration deal. As NPR's Scott Detrow reports, Pelosi did that while coming under more pressure from all sides.
Nancy Pelosi found herself in an interesting position earlier this morning. She liked a lot of things in the budget deal the House was about to vote on.
This is a success for us to get, as I said, the opioid crisis, boosting the NIH, pension crisis, caring for our veterans, making college more affordable, and investing in child care for our working families.
And yet she had spent most of the past 2 days trying to get other House Democrats to vote no. The reason? Pelosi and other Democratic leaders had vowed to use government funding measures as leverage to try and force a resolution for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. But House Speaker Paul Ryan still wouldn't promise to hold House debate on any measure President Trump had not already okayed.
Sometimes I think the Speaker thinks he's Speaker of the White House, not the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and that we should have the opportunity, oh, touched a nerve there, I hear.
So even though Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had negotiated a budget deal, Pelosi tried to tank it. House Democrats spent more than an hour behind closed doors Thursday as Pelosi made her case. As he left, California Democrat Brad Sherman explained what was happening inside.
Number one, she's not in favor of the bill. Number two, she's very persuasive.
But in the end, more than 70 House Democrats voted for the budget. That big of a split raises questions about Pelosi's clout with Democrats, even though most members of her caucus still won't criticize her publicly. And it comes at a time when the longtime leader finds herself once again the focus of Republicans, and not in a good way.
Now, how many of you saw that State of the Union speech? Was that something else?
That's Val DeGiorgio, chair of the Pennsylvania Republican Party. At a recent campaign rally in the Western Pennsylvania district holding a special House election, he was one of several Republican speakers to paint Pelosi as a liberal boogeyman.
Now, let me paint a picture for you. A year from now, the next State of the Union. Nancy Pelosi's not seated on the floor. She's up there on the podium behind the President of the United States. She's looking down.
Pelosi is playing a leading role in most of the ads Republicans are running in the race against the Democratic candidate. That was the case during last year's special elections, too, and it will likely be the case this fall. As Pelosi spoke about DACA on the House floor for a record-setting 8 hours this week, the Republicans' congressional campaign arm tweeted, "Dear Nancy Pelosi, every minute you're in front of the cameras, you make our job easier." Pelosi doesn't appear bothered by attacks from her opponents or the murmurs within her own caucus.
So you want me to sing my praises? Is that what you're saying? Why should I? Well, I'm a master legislator.
That was Pelosi's self-defense in June, when some Democrats raised questions about her leadership after the party's candidate lost a close, expensive contest in suburban Atlanta.
I am a strategic, politically astute leader. My leadership is recognized by many around the country, and that is why I'm able to attract the support that I do.
That's all being tested right now. As the leader of the minority party, Pelosi is trying to get as much as she can without much leverage. But she also has to show the Democratic base she won't compromise on key issues like immigration. Scott Detrow, NPR News.
You're listening to All Things Considered on WNYC. California Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, who is a leader of the Me Too movement, is herself now accused of harassment. We're going to have much more on that story just ahead. Stay tuned.
Support for WNYC comes from Silver Hill Hospital, restoring mental health since 1931 and now providing comprehensive treatment for eating disorders. Information at 1-866-547-4455 or online at silverhillhospital.org. The Met, now on view.